Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently, we are in the Gospel of John, chapter 3, and the discourse between Nicodemus and Jesus is a foundational teaching on what salvation is. And, you know, in chapter 1, verses 1 through 18 that we spent a lot of time on, um, because those 18 verses kind of lay out the chapter. And when we get to verse 17 of chapter 1, and it says the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth come through Jesus. And we're seeing this played out in this chapter, in this discourse, where Jesus is talking to a ruler of the Jews, an expert in the law of Moses, and yet tells this man he needs to be born again. He calls him out and says, you don't accept our testimony, kind of reveals his heart. But at the same time, he is going to contrast Nicodemus' entire life experience with the truth of the gospel. There are many Christians that could benefit, that should benefit from this chapter, because they have been taught. It has been ingrained in them that whatever their denomination is, but works usually comes into play. That you have to do some kind of works in order to get to heaven. So let's jump back into it, because we get to verse 16. Okay, verse 16, John 3:16, one of the most famous verse, and deservedly so. But let me go back to verse number 13, and then we will come up to 16 so you can understand what Jesus is saying. And again, keep this in mind, he's talking to Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. Verse 13, again, no one has ascended into heaven except the one who is descended from heaven, the Son of Man. By the way, this term Son of Man that Jesus referred to himself here is a very interesting phrase. Let's see if this kind of comes up here. The term Son of Man, you see this throughout the Old Testament. God refers to Ezekiel, the Son of Man. So it's kind of interesting how Jesus uses this term here. And you have to remember that when he says Son of Man, no one has ascended into heaven except the one who has descended from heaven. And then he says the Son of Man. Now, who is the Son of Man that Jesus is referring to here? Himself, meaning the Word that took upon flesh. And also keep in mind, Jesus is God with two natures, 100% God and then 100% man. In other words, Jesus is not a image or form of man. And that's important. That's important theologically to make the distinction here. That in the Old Testament, you would see an angel, for example, that would take upon the appearance of a man. And these were called angel ophanies. Sometimes you would see Jesus would take upon the form of a man, and these were called Christophanies. And then God the Father would sometimes take upon the form of a man, and then these were called theophanies. But these were, again, form. In other words, if you actually was to see, I don't know, was to touch or whatever, if you were able to grab, right? Hypothetically, because of course it wouldn't happen. But say if you was to grab and then strap down, God or Jesus or an angel, I'm going to say that if you was to say, let's dissect them, you wouldn't see human organs. You wouldn't, they're not, in a sense, real bodies. Jesus' body, which you see is Son of Man, Jesus is a real human, organs and all. It's not a form. It's just, he took upon flesh. So he says, no one has ascended into heaven except the one who descended from heaven, the Son of Man. Just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up so that everyone who believes in him will have eternal life. So here you see the statement of Jesus, the most simple statement of salvation that is so distorted throughout Christendom. Verse 16, for God so loved the world in this way. He gave his one and only Son, so that everyone who believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. And you know we're going to unpack this. So after saying here that, after kind of rebuking Nicodemus that he did not accept this testimony, that he said, and he uses this story straight out of the Old Testament that Nicodemus knew extremely well. That he says, all right, if you just as Moses lifted up the snake, the symbol of Jesus on the cross for salvation, providing salvation. And now he's going to say now why, because he gets into this, he's going to reveal something, as of course Jesus was sent here to reveal the Father, to reveal the will of the Father, right? So let me go back because I want to highlight something here. John chapter 1. So we studied this in detail, but I want to contrast the two. So watch this. Verse 1 says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now remember we said this, that if God was to grant, make it possible that you can travel back through time in eternity past, you would travel past your birth, you would travel past the creation of the earth, you would travel past the formation of the universe, and then you would travel back as far as it is possible to travel back. It wouldn't be time, because once you go past the earth and the universe, you are out of the confines of space time. So if you travel back, you would run into God. This is what John is revealing. In the beginning was the Word. But then he also goes on and says that not only would you see God, in other words, you would run into God. You would run into God because that's as far back you could travel. But you would run into God. But not only that, but what you would see is the Word. And remember this term Word here is the term logos. It is the image of the invisible God. So you wouldn't see the invisible God, but you would see the manifestation, the image that is the Word. And watch this. So the Word is with God and the Word is God. Okay? The Word is with God and the Word is God. He goes on to further reveal some of the nature of the Word. He was with God in the beginning. All things were created through him. And apart from him, not one thing that was created that has been created. Life was in him. So keep this in mind. Life was in him. In this life, that life was the light of man. And that light shined in the darkness, and yet the darkness did not overcome it. And in verse 14, and the Word became flesh and took up residency among us, and we observed his glory. The glory is of the one and only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. In verse 16, we have all received grace after grace from his fullness. Verse 17, for the law was given through Moses. I wanted to throw this in here since we're back here. This whole discourse in John chapter 3, for the law was given through Moses, and this represented by Nicodemus. Grace and truth comes through Jesus Christ. And then he says, no one has seen God, the one and only Son, the one who is at the Father's side. He has revealed him. Now, the reason I wanted to show you this, he has revealed him. The one and only Son came to reveal the Father. So when you, now that we see the Word that has taken on flesh, we are looking at a manifestation, a revelation of God, and as it was determined within the Godhead that Jesus would reveal the Father. Jesus would reveal the will of the Father, the nature of the Father, the purpose of the Father is in Jesus. So you don't have Jesus over here and God over there. You have in complete unity. Okay? So when Jesus says here, for God loved the world, he's revealing it. He's the manifestation. He is what we see in the nature of God, the love of God. Okay. So he says, so for God loved the world in this way. God loved the world in this way. Now watch this. So God loved the world in this way. So Jesus proclaims this. It is Jesus proclaiming it. The one who was at the Father's side. The one who came and took upon flesh, who came into the world. He is revealing God. So God loved the world in this way. Now he's talking to Nicodemus, remember. So now he tells us that he's not only going to tell us the salvation, but he's also now going to tell us, he's going to reveal to us why God saved. What was his motive? Why did he do it? And by the way, this revelation is so totally different than what Nicodemus had learned from the law of Moses. Even if you read through Deuteronomy, how God says, he tells the Israelites that I've chosen you as a special people. But you don't see this revelation here in terms of the salvation for the world, because he also tells them, but if you don't act right, I'm going to cut you off. And you see this in the writing of the prophet. But now he says here, for God loved the world. So now let's define the term world. Because this is the object. God says, God loved the world. Well, it's kind of, I'll come back to love. Well, I'll do a little here. So the word love, God loved the world, right? So God loved the world. There are, the Greek words, and you know, I rarely don't go through talking about the Greek, but I think it's important here because the English translation of the word loved, it's really only one word, but yet in the Greek language there are, I think, if memory serves me, up to 17 different Greek words that could be translated into an English word as love, right? Different groups. And then out of that four, you can say the four that kind of sums it up, compasses, like you have, excuse me, you have what's called eros, and that is the sexual love. You will see that word sometimes in the porn industry. Sex, they they took it and in a sense misused it. However, the word eros, in a sense, sexual attraction or sexual love. Okay, and then there is storage. If I'm pronouncing that correctly, I'm not a Greek scholar, but that's affection, emotions, affections. Okay, and then there's phileo, and that is, you could say, relationships, friendships. Now, all those different kinds of love, all of those different kinds of love, those three, I haven't gotten to agape yet, but those three loves, we could say, kind of form our human relationships and are necessary for our human relationship. But the problem with those three loves, eros, storge, phileo, is that they're all from a human perspective. So if I say eros, it's sexual attraction, but it's what I'm attracted to. If I say emotions, it's the kind of emotions that I'm, feeling for you. And if I say phileo, which could be a friendship or a relationship love, but it is kind of those qualities that I'm looking for in you, right? You see these goofy dating apps, and what do they ask you? What do you want in a relationship? And you list down all of the kind of qualities that you want in a relationship. That's phileo. Actually, it's kind of all three of those. It make up when you say the kind of those kind of human love, that it's phileo, it's eros, and it's storage. And if you want those, and that's what you kind of look and you say you hope to get that. The problem, of course, with those three loves is that, what about if things change? What about your sinful, selfish nature that comes in? And things do change. If sexual attraction, if you say I have to have a certain type, I have to have a certain body build, a certain look, that's one of the weakest of all. Just so you know, if you stop and think about it, all of the adult films and magazines, I don't know if they still even have magazines, but think about this. You have to have a different one every month, right? Because people get tired of that nature. And the same thing, if you say, well, I want this person to fit this way look, um, I want this person to have these type of mannerisms, but what if they change, right? Especially, I'm of the age, a lot has changed. A lot has changed since I was a young man. And then, it's kind of interesting because sometimes if I think about relationships that I had, not just, I mean, just friendships or whatever, I'm thinking about like when I grew up in St. Louis, and I left St. Louis when I was a teenager. My mind is still stuck there in St. Louis that at that time. And if I was to see someone, they've changed a lot, just like I've changed a lot. Like nothing like that. Nothing like that. So So what, how does, if those are the foundation of your love, they fail all the time. But they are love. Those are the different kinds of love, right? So when we get into the next study, we're going to talk about then God's love and why it is different, why it stands out. Okay, why we cannot compare ourselves, or we cannot compare God, because our experience in love can be totally different. And then too, when people say I love you, think about this. When people say I love you, think about that experience. How many times have we, you see a guy that knock his wife or his girlfriend upside the head and they go, but I love you, baby. Okay. All right. We'll get into this in the next study. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to VP the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought, a comment, add it to the comment section below. Our comments are welcome, and I will see you in the next video.